But then, almost overnight, America's obsession began to disappear. The vans that once turned heads everywhere they went were suddenly fading from the roads. So why did Americans fall so deeply in love with these wild custom vans? And why did it all come to an end so quickly? That's the story of America's wildest van craze, a strange chapter in automotive history when ordinary cargo vans were transformed into rolling works of art, personal hangouts, and symbols of freedom. To understand how the custom van craze took over America, we first have to go back to a time when vans were anything but glamorous. In the 1950s and early 1960s, vehicles like the Ford Econoline, Chevrolet Corvair Greenbrier, and Dodge A100 were primarily designed for work. Businesses used them to deliver goods. Plumbers and electricians used them as mobile workshops, and small companies depended on them for everyday transportation. They were practical, compact, and relatively inexpensive, but almost nobody looked at one and thought of it as a lifestyle vehicle. That began to change as American culture changed. By the late 1960s, younger Americans were looking for something different from the traditional family sedan. They wanted vehicles that could carry friends, camping gear, musical equipment, or anything else their lifestyle demanded. The van offered something a normal car couldn't: a huge, empty space that could be transformed into almost anything. And once people realized that, the humble work van was about to become something completely different. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, something unexpected was happening on American roads. People were no longer seeing vans simply as vehicles for businesses. They were beginning to see them as blank canvases. A basic cargo van could be transformed into a private lounge, a road trip machine, a camper, or even a rolling party room. The possibilities seemed almost endless, because the interior offered something most cars simply couldn't: space. Young Americans especially embraced the idea. A customized van could reflect your personality in a way a factory-built car couldn't. You could choose the seats, carpeting, lighting, sound system, paint, and countless other details. Some owners wanted a comfortable place to travel with friends, while others wanted their van to look completely outrageous. And the aftermarket industry quickly realized there was serious money to be made. Soon, specialized van shops began appearing across the country. They installed plush interiors, captain's chairs, wood trim, custom dashboards, powerful stereos, and eye-catching exterior graphics. What had started as a practical work vehicle was becoming a highly personalized machine, and America was beginning to take notice. Then came the transformation that turned ordinary vans into cultural icons. By the early 1970s, customization had become an industry of its own. Van owners were spending serious money turning basic Ford Econolines, Chevrolet G-Series vans, and Dodge Tradesmans into machines that looked nothing like they did when they left the factory. The interiors became especially wild. Plush carpeting could cover the floor, walls, and ceiling. Captain's chairs replaced basic seats, while couches, beds, cabinets, televisions, and elaborate stereo systems turned the back of the van into a private lounge. Some even added refrigerators, small bars, and elaborate lighting. These weren't just vehicles anymore, they were personal spaces on wheels. Outside, things became even more dramatic. Custom paint jobs featured murals, flames, airbrushed artwork, stripes, and psychedelic designs. Chrome wheels and oversized tires completed the look. And because every van could be customized differently, owners weren't simply buying a vehicle. They were creating something that represented who they were. By the middle of the 1970s, the custom van had become far more than a niche hobby. It was becoming a full-blown American craze. By the middle of the 1970s, custom vans were everywhere. They appeared at car shows, fairs, beaches, campgrounds, and on the streets of cities across America. Van clubs began forming, and owners would travel long distances just to meet other enthusiasts and show off their latest creations. For many people, the van wasn't simply a vehicle anymore. It was part of their identity. Movies and television helped push the trend even further. The image of the customized van became closely connected with freedom, adventure, music, and the counterculture of the era. Suddenly, a plain cargo van could be transformed into something that looked like it belonged in a completely different world. Bright murals, luxurious interiors, oversized wheels, and powerful stereos made these vehicles impossible to ignore. Automakers noticed what was happening. Ford, Chevrolet, and Dodge continued producing vans in huge numbers, while an entire aftermarket industry grew around customizing them. Companies sold conversion packages that promised buyers a more comfortable and stylish van without requiring them to build everything themselves. And for a while, it seemed like the custom van craze could only get bigger. But beneath all that excitement, the American automobile industry was already entering a period of major change. Fuel prices were rising, the economy was becoming more difficult, and consumers were starting to think differently about the vehicles they drove. The custom van's golden age was closer to its end than anyone realized. So what made these vans so appealing in the first place? Part of the answer was simple. They offered freedom. A normal sedan was designed around a fixed purpose. You sat in it, drove it, and got out. A custom van was different. It gave owners a large private space that they could design however they wanted. For young families, musicians, travelers, and groups of friends, that flexibility was incredibly attractive. There was also something emotional about owning one. During the 1970s, individuality mattered. Americans wanted products that reflected their personalities, and a custom van was almost the perfect expression of that idea. Two people could buy the exact same van and end up with completely different vehicles. One might become a luxurious road trip lounge, while another could turn into a wild rolling art project. The van also arrived at the perfect cultural moment. Road trips were popular, outdoor recreation was growing, and the aftermarket automotive industry was booming. Customization gave people a way to escape the ordinary without buying an exotic sports car. For a relatively affordable price, an ordinary work van could become something that felt completely unique. But the same decade that created the custom van craze was also preparing to destroy it. By the late 1970s, the world around these vehicles was changing, and the biggest problem was something no amount of custom paint or plush carpeting could fix: fuel. By the late 1970s, the world that had created the custom van craze was changing fast. The oil crisis had made fuel prices a serious concern for American drivers, and suddenly, efficiency mattered more than it had before. Large, heavy vans with powerful engines and elaborate interiors were not exactly the vehicles people wanted when every trip to the gas station became more expensive. But fuel economy wasn't the only problem. The American auto industry was entering a period of tighter emissions and safety regulations, while buyers were becoming more practical about what they needed from a vehicle. The outrageous custom van that looked perfect at a 1975 van show didn't necessarily make sense for someone trying to save money or transport a growing family. There was also a change in taste. The wild graphics, shag carpeting, and nightclub-style interiors that had defined the custom van scene began to feel increasingly dated as the 1980s approached. Americans were still interested in vans, but they were beginning to want something different, something more practical, comfortable, and family-friendly. The custom van industry could survive changing trends, but it couldn't survive losing the cultural excitement that had made these vehicles special. And then, a new type of vehicle arrived that would completely change what Americans expected from a family van. That new vehicle was the minivan. When Chrysler introduced the Dodge Caravan and Plymouth Voyager for the 1984 model year, it offered American families something the old custom vans couldn't easily provide. These new vehicles were smaller, easier to drive, more fuel efficient, and designed from the beginning around everyday family life. They had sliding doors, flexible seating, and a car-like driving experience that made them far more practical for suburban America. The difference was enormous. A traditional full-size van could still carry more people and equipment, but the minivan didn't ask families to sacrifice convenience just to get that extra space. It fit into garages more easily, was easier to maneuver, and used less fuel. Most importantly, it looked like a normal family vehicle rather than a modified commercial machine. The timing couldn't have been better. By the 1980s, the outrageous custom van aesthetic was already fading, and the minivan offered a fresh alternative. Families didn't need shag carpeting, murals, or a massive stereo system anymore. They wanted reliability, practicality, comfort, and room for the kids. The irony was that the minivan didn't kill America's love of vans. It simply changed what Americans wanted their vans to be. The wild custom van had represented freedom and individuality. The minivan represented convenience and family life. And for most buyers, convenience won. By the late 1980s, the custom van craze that had once seemed unstoppable was largely a memory. Full-size vans were still being built, and people still customized them, but the wild culture of the 1970s had disappeared. You didn't see the same endless rows of psychedelic murals, shag carpeting, and outrageous interiors that had once defined America's roads. But the custom van didn't really die, it evolved. Conversion vans continued to attract buyers who wanted luxury and extra space, while enthusiasts kept the tradition alive at car shows and gatherings. Later generations would rediscover the idea through camper vans, adventure vans, and highly personalized builds. What disappeared was the cultural moment. For a brief period, an ordinary commercial van became a symbol of freedom, creativity, and individuality. Americans took something designed to deliver packages and turned it into a rolling expression of their personality. And perhaps that's why the custom van era remains so fascinating today. It wasn't just about the vehicles themselves. It was about a time when people were willing to make their cars completely their own, even if that meant covering the walls in carpet, painting a giant mural across the side, and turning a simple van into something nobody else on the road could ignore. The American custom van craze may have disappeared, but its influence never really went away. You can still see its legacy in modern camper vans, conversion vans, and the growing obsession with turning vehicles into personalized living spaces. The difference is that today's builds use modern technology instead of shag carpeting and psychedelic murals. For a few unforgettable years, America turned ordinary work vans into rolling works of art and created one of the strangest automotive trends of the 1970s. It was bold, excessive, and completely unique to its time, and maybe that's exactly why we still remember it. If you enjoyed this look back at one of America's forgotten automotive crazes, make sure to like the video and subscribe to Tanda Vintage Steering for more stories about the cars, trucks, and forgotten vehicles that shaped American history. And tell us in the comments, would you actually drive a fully customized 1970s van today?